Greetings, scholars, and welcome to Following the Gong, a podcast of the Schreyer Honors College at Penn State. Following the Gong takes you inside conversations with our scholar alumni to hear their stories so you can gain career and life advice and expand your professional network. You can hear the true breadth of how scholar alumni have gone on to shape the world after they rang the gong and graduated with honors, and learn from their experiences so you can use their insights in your own journey. This show is proudly sponsored by the Scholar Alumni Society, a constituent group of the Penn State Alumni Association. I'm your host, Sean Goheen, class of 2011 and college staff member. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. Tina Flint Hennesse, class of 1993, is an assistant vice president for university development at Penn State, where she oversees alumni relations and development work at 14 of the university's colleges, campuses, and other units, including the Schreyer Honors College. Before returning to her alma mater in 2009, Tina worked first as a newspaper reporter and editor for 10 years, transitioning to higher education fundraising, holding positions at Arcadia University and Montgomery County Community College, both in suburban Philadelphia. Tina earned her BA in journalism with honors in 1993. She earned her MBA from Arcadia University in 2007. She's happy to discuss fundraising or her beekeeping hobby, and feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. In our conversation, Tina provides insight through her story on topics like choosing to start at a Commonwealth Campus close to home, the value of starting in the college as a second or third year student at Penn State, using your involvement in campus organizations as professional preparation, leveraging your thesis in job interviews, identifying what you are good at that can be a transferrable skill like writing. She also talks about recognizing the signs when you need to make a career change or industry change. Tina goes on to talk about what major gift officers are and what they do for organizations like Penn State, saying no to focus on honing your skills and learning all parts of a work unit, balancing leadership and technical responsibilities as you move up in an organization, tackling the challenge of being a leader of disparate teams, fostering environments for leadership to grow without formal titles, how an MBA is helpful working in a nonprofit and higher education setting, how and why scholars could get into fundraising and university advancement work, and approaching mentorship as a mentor and as a mentee. And with that, we'll get into Tina's story, Following the Gong. Tina, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. And just a little bit up front for our listeners, Tina is in what you might use in common terms, my boss's boss. So just full disclosure there, but I'm super excited to have you on the show as one of our scholar alumni. So welcome, Tina. If we could just kick off with just telling us a little bit about your current role here at Penn State.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. I'm really excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation. So I am the assistant vice president for university development. I'm one of three individuals in these roles. And for my part, I oversee 14 of our fundraising and alumni relations offices. So those 14 offices are embedded in our colleges, our campuses, and what we call our special mission units, like the university libraries. And so Schreyer Honors College, in addition to being one of my alma maters, is also one of my units that I oversee.
And we are very proud to be a part of what we affectionately call Team Tina in the cohort, along with some other great colleges and campuses, as well as you said, the university libraries. So I want to start at the very beginning, and I know you kind of have a unique origin story of how you came to pick Penn State as your alma mater, as you said. So could you tell us how you came to pick the university? When
it was time to choose a college, I didn't have a lot of experience and I didn't have a lot of role models, quite honestly. And my father had attended Penn State, what was then Penn State Ogontz, and is now Penn State Abington, for just a couple semesters. He always said he quote, D'd out. He got straight Ds. He knew that they would draft him, so he enlisted and ended up in Vietnam. And he ultimately got a degree in night school, but it wasn't a traditional path. And that was part of why, as a family, we just didn't really understand the process. And so I applied to some regional schools, with Penn State being one of them. And Penn State, of course, as anyone from Pennsylvania knows, is a big name and is very exciting. And I was accepted to University Park, and I still remember that an alum called me on the phone to say, "Do you have any questions? We're excited to welcome you to University Park." And I said, "I have one question. I don't know how to change my acceptance to my local campus, right? Because I just didn't know how you went about going to college." So that kicked off my college career, where I was a commuter student at what is now Penn State Abington. Had a great experience. Worked while I was doing that, and after 3 semesters, I had to transfer to University Park. I'm not sure I would have otherwise, but it's one of the best things that happened to me. It really was transformative for me as a person to go away to college and have that experience.
And as part of that transition, in your what we used to refer to as your sophomore year, you joined the University Scholars Program. Can you tell us about the impact that had on your experience, both at what we now call Abington and at University Park?
Yeah, I remember my dad saying, "You got invited to this. He opened the mail and you got invited to do this thing." And so I said yes. I almost said no to the invitation. I didn't really understand what it was. It sounded kind of like a lot of work. But I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And I'm really glad I did. It funneled me into honors courses because I had taken an honors course or two at Abington before being invited and accepted into what was then the Scholars Program. But part of being in the program necessitated that you continue to take honors courses. And at University Park, they were incredibly small classes where you got to have really good, in-depth conversations with your peers. They were really intellectually stimulating classes, and they were all of them. I mean, I remember so many of them very clearly. And some of them would be add-ons to others. So I had a really large class in the forum that was a theater course, but we had an honors section that brought 6 or 8 of us together in a conference room once a week to talk about what we were doing in that class. That was really special. And then on top of that, the act of choosing and writing a thesis and working closely with an advisor was very unique among all the people I was friends with in college, and forced me to be a better student and to be more focused on what I was doing.
And obviously, you have gone on to become a leader in the Division of Developmental Alumni Relations in the advancement field. But this is not something that you can really major in terms of a career path. So can you tell us about your actual major that you pursued and the co-curricular opportunities related to that you pursued?
Sure. So I majored in journalism, and I was part of, at Penn State Abington, Ogontz, I was the editor of the Ogontz Campus News. So it was kind of defunct when I got there. And it was fun to pull together a group of people to start to, reimagine a campus newspaper that we put out once a month. I became very close with the advisor for the newspaper, who also taught one of my honors classes. And so he's somebody who I kept in touch with for years and years until he retired. And we did something kind of from scratch. And I remember our office so clearly. I visited that campus not too long ago, and walking to that office really meant a lot to me. And then when I transferred to University Park, I was part of the Daily Collegian staff. That is an exceptional opportunity for students, not just journalism students by any stretch. Any student has that interest in writing for a newspaper will have a tremendous experience at the Collegian. So I did that as well. There were other opportunities for me as an honors student. One that I remember in the College of Communications. Well, it wasn't a college then, but it is now. We went to Washington, D.C. for a day, and we got to sit and listen to the Supreme Court. And then we had a private meeting with Justice Antonin Scalia, which was just amazing experience. I'll never forget it.
Wow. I can't even imagine having a one-on-one meeting with any Supreme Court justice, let alone one who served on the court as long as he did. That is tremendous. So you mentioned your time with the newspapers, and I think that's a particular mark of Schreier scholars is being able to help lead these efforts. And I think, particularly at University Park, you hear there's not a club, create it. But that's a particularly great opportunity at our Commonwealth campuses is to step up and help. In your case, you resurrected something that had been defunct. So certainly, no matter what campus you're at or start at, there are opportunities abounding. And as you mentioned, one of those great opportunities was writing your thesis. Do you remember what you wrote about and why you picked that topic?
Sure. Yeah, I do. I really wanted to go to law school. I had been a legal secretary through high school and college and summers, and that was just what I thought I wanted to do. And so when I took a communications law class, I asked that professor if she had any thoughts about what I should do for my thesis. And she suggested I write a legal brief about a case. It was Milkovich v. Lorraine Journal. It had been recently decided by the Supreme Court, and it was about whether or not newspapers could be sued for libel based on opinion pieces. I'm going to admit that I don't 100% remember where this. I think the Supreme Court came down against the newspaper in that ruling, which is why she wanted me to pursue it. And I remember sitting in the Petit library, Friday, Saturday nights, everybody's out having fun, and I'm reading legal briefs and really trying to figure out how to make sense of this. It was work I wouldn't have done for any other reason. And it's something I talked about. I remember going to job interviews and talking about that because as a budding journalist, somebody who wanted to work at newspapers, being able to talk about the work I did on a legal case that was really important in the industry was interesting to people. And so I was able to talk about that really in depth. And that was pretty powerful.
Now, obviously, law and journalism are both career paths where you need to have really, really great writing skills. And obviously, you could talk about your thesis experience in those and other professions. But Tina, you mentioned you wanted to go to law school, but you just also mentioned that you were looking for jobs in the journalism industry. So how did you end up settling on the career path that you went down as opposed to going to law school?
So, I'm going to again say, as somebody who didn't have a lot of mentors in a professional way, I couldn't envision a path that would take me to post-baccalaureate. And I couldn't afford it. And I didn't understand about the ways that you got funding. So I was prepared to apply and ultimately just, didn't. I put that on hold. I continued to think about it for years. And I got the job in newspapers. I did that. I worked in that space for 10 years. At the end of that time, before I left, so it was probably about 8 years in, I took a fellowship to work in Washington, D.C., and I worked for a congressman there and did some in-depth work with the American Political Science Association. That program was really for journalists, and that helped remind me that I, maybe didn't want to go to law school, but that I really loved, doing work that was important to me. And how newspapers had intersected with that. The work in Congress intersected with that. And a couple years later, it was time to think about a career change. And I looked at higher education and had an opportunity to move into a role in development and alumni relations at a small liberal arts college near where I was living at the time. And that was a great move for me. I found a real passion in development work, and I was also then able to pursue graduate work. So I got my MBA instead of a law degree, and that was a good degree to get. I really liked it. It fit well with my interests by the time I got there.
So there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to take a step back into your journalism career for a minute. I know you were both a reporter, correct, and an editor along the way. So what skills have you been able to take from your journalism days into your advancement? Because I don't know the exact statistic, but people don't stick in one career anymore. Our scholars are going to go on and change careers and industries even. So transferable skills are crucial for lifetime success. So what were you able to take from career number one into career number two?
I think that's a great point. So for me, the ability to write well and succinctly was something that has carried me through this career change. It helped me when I was actually working in Congress, especially the piece about being able to write quickly, clearly, and briefly. That's a skill that's rare, but that people see the journalists bring. So I heard that as soon as I got into my fellowship, people said, we love the journalists because they can write briefing papers that are one sheet, right? And most people can't do that. But throughout my career, I've heard over and over that my ability to write well is recognized and differentiates me. So that's something I think scholars get too, the act of writing a thesis, going in depth with your writing in a way that not every student does, helps hone that as well. And then really listening to people, asking questions, understanding that you sit and listen. That is something that has helped me in this profession in particular. A lot of our work is about one-on-one relationship building. And really, people want to be asked good questions. You're doing a great job. This is the type of thing that you're doing right now. People want to be asked good questions, and they want this space to talk about it. And I come into this profession knowing that there's great value in being quiet and listening and being able to talk to people and remember what they say.
Absolutely. And that is something I want to ask about in a little bit, is about the relational roles that we have in this profession. But you mentioned you were in journalism for about 8 or so years, 10 years. And I imagine that there was a lot of soul searching that you did as you were considering giving up something that had been a part of your life for, presumably, if you count your Penn State days, 12, 15 years. What were the signs that were maybe telling you it's time to make a change? And how did you, think about that? Perhaps, was there family consideration? Walk us through, and briefly, your mindset and decision-making process in making that major career move.
So, yes, I realized in the 1990s, would have been, I guess it would have been early 2000s at this point, 2001, 2002. Newspaper industry was in great decline. I was realizing that there was really nowhere for me to go. I had been promoted in the organization I worked for, which was a regional newspaper chain. I came back from the fellowship and I soon was moved into the executive editor and director of production roles. That was really the top of that company for me. And I was relatively young. I was leading a large team and there was nowhere for me to go. And I was feeling like I wanted to accomplish more. I knew that. The hardest part of that was the transition out. Because I think sometimes we get stuck and we get limited by our own expectations. Often I have opportunities to talk to young people who might be going through a similar conversation with themselves. And in my mind, that conversation is about opportunity. And people are afraid to take what they perceive as a step backwards for opportunity. And my advice is always that sometimes you have to do that. You need to step sideways or even back in order to leap forward. And that was my experience. I was at the very top of this company, and I really took a big step backwards in taking a role as a major gift officer at this institution in suburban Philadelphia. But it was a decision I made for an opportunity for myself. I was recently married, and we were just about to start a family. And while I was there, we did start our family. And making that move was the right decision. Journalism was not the place I wanted to be at that point in my life. It was hard. I missed kind of the creative fun of the journalism space. People who've worked there will talk about there's lots of crazy stories, and you really are in the thick of things, and that can be exciting, but it can also be exhausting. And it's, I think it's pretty natural for people at some point to think it's time for me to move on to something else. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think knowing that our students probably have those same thoughts around majors and changing majors, or may have these around careers, I think this is very helpful. Now, you mentioned a term that we know very well, which is major gift officer. Can you tell the listener a little bit more about what exactly a major gift officer is?
So our major gift officers are individuals who work in our alumni relations and development offices, and their role is to engage with typically alumni, sometimes others, but for this purpose, we'll talk about alumni of the institution, meet with them usually one-on-one. That's a big part of that process. Talk to them about their interests and their experience, and ultimately be thinking about, does this person that I'm talking to want to make a gift, a philanthropic gift to this institution? And do they have the ability to do that? Do they want to do it? And can I help them do that? Ultimately, you do ask for money. That's the thing that most people say, I could never ask for money. And I think you'd be surprised at what you can do. If you have the tools and the skill and somebody to help you understand it, sitting down with somebody and helping them make the gift they want to make is a really wonderful and rewarding thing to do. We don't ever take gifts from individuals that they don't want to give us and that don't bring them joy. And so it's really, I feel much more like our major gift officers are both facilitators for individuals who want to make gifts, and they're also advocates for those people. They advocate for them at the institution to help them meet their goals and their interests, making sure that their scholarship is awarded to the type of student they want to help, for example. That's really important work, and it helps our students. It helps our institutions. And usually the thing that makes our work so rewarding is that the person who's made the gift, the person we call the donor, thanks us. They're really pleased that we were able to help them do what they ultimately really wanted to do anyway.
Working with some of these MGOs, and this is a term you'll see in a lot of nonprofit spaces as well, not just at Penn State or in higher education. I liken them as well to kind of bridge builders between the institution and the donors, right? Helping them. But particularly, there's almost an educational aspect to it. I think a lot of donors, from what I've seen, tend to be surprised at the creativity that can be involved in the ways that you can support. Perhaps you're making a gift of a painting or software, or even a horse can be a gift in some cases for our colleagues over in the College of Agricultural Sciences. And so the gift officers help folks understand this. And like you said, they're making a difference for our students, for our faculty, for our graduate students, but particularly in the Honors College for our undergraduate scholars of note. And so you've advanced to a senior leadership role pretty quickly in your time at Penn State. Can you kind of walk us through your career progression within DDAR, as we call it, from your starting point now to being in the leadership team for the division as an assistant vice president?
Yeah, and I like that term, bridge builder. I'll hold on to that one too, so thank you for that. So I came to Penn State. Penn State actually found me as somebody working in development in suburban Philadelphia, and one of their alums. And so they had a newly formed office that was meant to recruit people into these NGO roles. Because at the time, and I think still this is the case, there are not enough qualified people to fill the openings nationally for major gift officers. So Penn State started an office to help recruit for that, and they found me. I had updated my information in the database just to cue to all of our future alums that keep that information updated, because they were able to send me an email and say, we have an opening. We'd like for you to look at it. After, many months of that process, finding the right fit at Penn State and deciding that my husband and my now 2 young children wanted to make a move to State College, I settled in the College of Engineering here as a major gift officer. And one of the decisions I made personally at that time, having managed and led big teams for a while, was that I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to learn how to do fundraising at a Big Ten institution and learn to do it really well without any distractions. So I made a conscious decision to put my head down, to not raise my hand for any opportunities, no matter what, and to get really good at this work for Penn State. So I was in the College of Engineering for 4 years, and ultimately I feel like I was very successful there. And once it was time for me to move on, I decided again to take a sideways step. To some extent, I went into what is called our Office of Gift Planning. There was an opening there. This is interesting because it marries both my interest in and my experience with the legal profession and with fundraising. Because our Office of Gift Planning are individuals, many of whom are actually attorneys. They have law degrees. And their role is to help the donors make the best decisions they can make about how to make their gift. Sometimes that might be they want to leave a bequest in their will or their estate plan that says, when I die, Penn State will get some money for a scholarship. Sometimes it's just figuring out how to structure a gift in the most tax advantageous way. There are lots of rules in that space, and we want to help people make the best decisions they can. So I did that for a year. I really enjoyed it. I likely would have stayed a little longer, but by that point, I think I was ready for leadership, and the institution recognized I was ready for leadership. And so a position became open to lead the team in the College of the Liberal Arts, and I decided to step into that role, lead one of the larger and more complex teams here at the institution. That was a wonderful experience. I enjoyed working with that team very much. We raised a lot of money and kicked off this current campaign together. And then the opportunity opened to take a vertical promotion. So I kept the college as part of my portfolio, but to add all those other units into my portfolio and lead centrally, manage those units, and help them through this campaign. So I took that opportunity after a few years. So I've been here going on, I guess, 12 and a half years, if I'm counting correctly. And I've been in 4 different offices. I think I've had 5 different titles, maybe. I'm proud of that. It makes me a very, I think, well-rounded member of our division. I can speak to both unit-based work and central work. I know what it's like to work in a central unit, what we sometimes refer to as central support units that are supporting the teams in the colleges, like the Office of Gift Planning. So I understand that work very much. And then I also understand what it's like to be in a college like you are, Sean, and know that you work for both the Division of Development and Alumni Relations, but you also very directly work with and for and support an academic leader like your dean. And that's important work.
So very complex work that we do. Can you speak a little bit to, and I know you're going to say every day is different, but what is a day in the life of your job really like?
One of the challenges as you, I think, advance in leadership is that much of your time is spent, and I'm sure everybody's heard this, in meetings, right? What does that mean? So a big part of my day is spent in one-on-one meetings with my direct reports. I meet with them once a month. There are 14 of them. we try and when I say we, it's myself and my assistant who manages my calendar and is really an important part of I don't want to say my personal success, but she and I work together for the success of what I see as, my office, me and her, and how are we successful together. So we try very hard to keep my one-on-ones to 1 week a month. So it all happens in 1 week. That's a busy week. So a day might have a lot of one-on-ones, maybe 2 or 3. It also will have meetings centrally. And there'll be, hopefully, on a good day, there's a block of maybe 3 hours that is set aside for me to do work. In reality, that time gets eaten up even when it's on my calendar with, I need 15 minutes of your time. Can we talk today? Type of meeting. So spend a lot of time doing that. I get up at 5 a.m. every day. I start my day with email and coffee and take care of anything that I couldn't get to the day before and anything that might feel like an emergency that morning. I usually then go for a run. So that's where a lot of that work happens. Get through all those meetings during the day that I've described, have some one-off conversations, and then usually I leave the office at about 6. Another piece of my day that I have to find time for, and that is really important, I do continue to fundraise for the institution, and that's really an important part of my role. And so carving out the time for that. And again, this is a leadership puzzle and challenge that everybody as they move into leadership will face, which is you tend to be promoted because of your success as a technical expert in something. And nobody wants you to give that thing up necessarily. But it becomes the thing that you have less and less time for as you become a leader. And so balancing that is part of the job. Figuring it out is part of the job. So I spend time on that every day. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to develop the next leaders in our division, how to support them, how to help them be successful.
And I'd also like to throw out that you are probably working on your weekly email that you send out to all of your teams, giving them a full rundown every Friday of what is going on and making sure that we are staying communicative as a cohort of units. And to that point, I'm curious. So you manage 14 teams. So how, you're not just managing 14 directors, but you're managing 14 teams. So how do you manage a portfolio that broad, especially when there's, small Commonwealth campuses, large colleges that you parked, the libraries, and this real diverse portfolio? How do you approach that as a leader?
So when I took this role, one of the things I did was I went to my volunteers. So I was still in the College of Liberal Arts when I was being promoted into this role. And I was very close to our volunteers. We were at a baseball game in a box, pre-COVID, many years pre-COVID. And I went to one of them in particular, I remember, and said, what I really care about is leading a team. I think what had previously been the model for people in this position had been that we had individual directors who reported to us, but they had nothing in common other than that they reported to us. And so you met with them individually and you just went about your business. And I knew that I liked to lead teams. And that implies that there's a common purpose, that we're working together to get to a common goal, and that we're supporting each other and helping each other. We're not just looking at a goal off in the distance and individually running after it. We're a team. We're trying to get there together. So I asked this volunteer, what did he think I could do to create a team out of these disparate directors who were going to report to me? And he gave me some good advice about finding tasks that they could work on together, identifying some senior leaders among them and pulling them together. So I took that advice. I took some other best practice that I knew existed. And I also asked the people I was going to manage, what did they think was important for me to do. So we started pretty quickly with that group of directors having regular meetings. And this included getting on conference calls once a month, because some of my directors did not work here. Originally, that group was only 9. So I had 2 directors in that group who did not work at University Park. So we would do conference calls once a month. And then on the other month, we would get together in person for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, where we would usually have lunch and unpack some big topics. I might send readings ahead of time. We might have some big things to talk about. And we would really spend that time talking about ideas and deciding how we were going to continue to move this idea of our cohort forward. At some point during that period, I started this weekly email. It was an idea I took from a colleague at UNC, and it was a great idea. I'm sure emails look nothing alike because they're all about us and our personalities and how we show up. But just the idea that you communicate to your team in writing once a week and capture the week. So I started that. I think that is about building this team culture as well. And the purpose of the email, so I was building this culture with the directors, but I realized I wanted a culture that included the whole teams, as you point out. And so the email was the way to get to everybody and to make everybody feel like they were on one team. I focus on good news. I want to highlight the work that our teams are doing that really is notable and worth noting. We are all always looking at the goal of dollars raised as a division, as an institution. So I include all gifts to our units in that email. But one of the decisions I made was to include with everybody's name, their title and the unit they work for, kind of in parentheses after their name. And that was really meant to start to have individuals recognize who their colleagues were by name, really start to understand that. So kick that off. It was hard initially to find enough content. Over time, that has not really been an issue. It has gotten easier and easier over time to really have plenty for that email every week. What happened organically from that, though, is those team members started saying to me, we want to meet in person. We see all these names. I hear about all this great work that my colleagues are doing, but I want to meet them. How can we do this? So that's where Karen, again, working with me as closely as she does, Karen and I scheduled what we called our all cohort meeting. It was the only one we've ever had in person. We have another one planned for this December. Because it happened in the fall of 2019. So we would have had a second one in the spring of 2020, but the pandemic stopped that from happening. So we had this big meeting, and we found space in the university libraries. Everybody came. I think we maybe had 2 people from our whole team that couldn't attend. And we created activities that were team building in nature, and we put people together in groups by what they did in their units. So we wanted all of the alumni relations team members to sit together and get to know each other, and all of the administrative support team members the same with the major gift officers and the directors. And it worked really well. And when we went into remote work, the first thing that happened was that our administrative team, who during that all cohort meeting were Team Purple, we all had a color, started meeting every week on Zoom, and they called it the Purple Team meetings. And I hear about those meetings from all reaches of this institution and how much they have impacted that group, held them together, supported them through remote work. And they supported each other. There's no one else in that room. I don't want to say there's no leader there, because they're leaders for making it happen. But no organizational leader, nobody with that title stepped in to say, hey, do this. They did it on their own, and it's been tremendously successful. Other cohorts have since kind of modeled meetings after that. So those are the ways I think we really built that idea of team. I how do I manage? I mean, I look at data all the time. I think anyone who is part of my cohort knows that I am constantly looking at the data. I can usually tell you how your unit's doing. Is your college going to make goal? What's your percent? I usually have that somewhere in my head. And I think it's a great way to both inspire a little bit of positive competitiveness among our units, and also help us help each other. So, we've had 5 of our units have already hit goal in our campaign. We have another, basically the rest of this fiscal year through to June 30 in this campaign. But those units are prepared to help their colleagues get to their goals. And I take a lot of pride in that part of what our cohort has created.
Absolutely. And as one of the 100+ folks who are in Team Tina, certainly we have latched on all of these things. And, I'm always like, oh, are there going to be pictures of the bees this week in the weekly email? And we can talk about that in a little bit. But I want to go back. You were talking about, you kind of pulled from some best practices, putting this email together. And much earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that you went and got an MBA. And obviously we are a nonprofit institution. So how do you find that degree in particular to be helpful in your current role?
When I was hired in the College of Engineering, the director there actually was pleased that I had an MBA because so many of their alumni went on to business degrees. I, in particular, supported industrial engineering, which is a degree that went into industry and business. So to some extent, it helped me have a common language with some of my prospects and to understand some of the concept that they're talking about. Bigger than that, though, I think the MBA helps me understand teams. We studied, Harvard business case studies around what makes a good leader, how to manage teams. It helps me understand this giant institution because in some ways, although we're nonprofit, the idea that we have these separate colleges is much like a business unit in a large company. And I understand that very much. I understand those funding models. It helps me think about them in ways that make sense and makes me look at the decisions our leaders make very positively. I think our leadership is exceptional. But I also have a sense of why that's important. So the other thing, and I am comfortable talking about this with individuals too, education is positive kind of just for education's sake, right? Having a master's degree and having read things and studied. We went on 2 international trips as part of my MBA and spent a week in other countries learning about their economic models and their businesses, their business industry. It makes me somebody who can talk about those things with anybody. And I think, the same is true for our undergraduate degrees. Many of our students and our young alumni will not necessarily work in a space that lines up directly with the degree they get. But the degree is important just because it makes us smarter, well-rounded, intelligent people who can speak about what's happening in the world, what's happening in current events, in ways that helps us connect with other people. It is about connection. So, I wanted a master's degree because I really did want a master's degree. The MBA interested me. And probably those 2 things were more important than whether or not it was going to directly benefit me professionally. If I hadn't been interested in it, I may not have done as well.
And earlier you mentioned that when you were recruited to Penn State for your initial major gift officer role, that there's kind of a glut of positions and not enough staff to fill them just in the industry. Beyond that, just knowing that there are lots of jobs available in this space, why should a student consider a career in philanthropy and particularly in university advancement?
I think we can pause before we even go beyond that. the opportunity is exceptional. And for students who are looking for ways to get into a career that has a lot of opportunity for advancement, working in higher education, fundraising, and honestly, fundraising anywhere, holds that promise. And it's not just our fundraising, it's the whole, as Sean said, the whole advancement operation, that operation of a nonprofit and in higher education that kind of looks out at the world and engages people with our institutions on that border between the two. So there's lots of opportunity, and I think that alone should be interesting to some of our young people who are considering what to do after they graduate. In addition, though, it is fulfilling work, working closely with people who care about Penn State. So I'll speak specifically about Penn State. We get to work really closely with Penn State alums who have really warm memories of their time here and want to use that positive emotion in a way that benefits our institution and our students. And much of that is about fundraising, but not all of it. We need alumni who are going to mentor our students. In a lot of our spaces, we need a really vibrant alumni base to help us get internship and co-op opportunities for students. That matters a lot. And so that engagement really does have positive impact. We're doing work that positively impacts the institution that we love, our students who need it, and are going to be launched into the world in a better way if we can support them. Because of the work that we do, they'll be launched in a better way. That feels great. I take a lot of pride in that. So I think for somebody thinking about a career that is meaningful, it's different all the time. There's lots of events. There's lots of people to meet. If you are going to be a frontline fundraiser, even some of our alumni relations team members, you're going to travel a lot. That was appealing to me, honestly, when I started doing this work. And I know it's appealing to some of our other team members as well. And if that's not what you want, there's lots of work in stewardship. There's lots of other work that we do that is still rewarding in all the same ways, but maybe doesn't have that travel component and that other piece.
So you mentioned mentorship, and obviously that's the goal of this podcast is mentorship. So how do you approach mentorship, both as a mentor who is successful in your career and two different careers, and how also do you still be a mentee at your point in your career?
So as I approach mentorship, I want to help people who I'm working with get to the next level for themselves. Where do they want to get to, and how can I help them? So I do look at my mentorship as an opportunity to have conversations where I bring honest stories about my experience to the table to help others move through spaces that may be challenging for them. I'm really comfortable talking about my career and my history with people that I'm mentoring in ways that hopefully helps connect them to a story that they see a path forward for themselves. So I really want to support that. I want to see things in them that maybe they don't see in themselves, and help them achieve their goals at that level. As a mentee, I am really comfortable, and I think this is a space that for my entire career will be true for me. And I'd suggest other people, do some reflection about this and try and capture it, which is I want to continue to learn. I want feedback. I want to know how I can be better at what I do. My boss, Dave Lieb, I've worked with him and directly for him for many years. I go to him all the time with questions, hard questions, things that I can't quite figure out. And I genuinely want his guidance on that. And there are others. I went through a leadership program a few years ago for advancement professionals in the large public institutions in the country. And somebody I met through that program, he and I struck up a regular conversation by Zoom during the pandemic. And I felt like he was able to mentor me around how do I help my staff through this period of time. And, he was somebody with not a lot of fundraising experience. Ultimately, he's just taken a position as a vice president. And so I was able to give him some advice in that space as well. So we felt like we were both helping each other, which is always nice. But I don't feel that I am done being mentored. I know that I can use lots of insight. I'm at an age where the people who first mentored me, some of them have passed. Some of them are retiring, and that causes a lot of reflection too. What do I want my legacy to be as somebody who helped others achieve their goals professionally and sometimes personally as well.
Is there any suggestions that you would have for a student as they seek out mentors to get their career started?
Be creative. Think about where do you want to be, maybe, and who can help you talk through that process. Your mentor is not necessarily the person who's going to get you there. And I'm not sure you should pick a mentor because you think they can get you a job. I don't know that will necessarily bring you exactly what you want. You want somebody who's going to be able to talk to you about the things that are important to you and help you make decisions that are difficult and challenging. One of my first mentors at Penn State, Jean Songer, she was an AVP at the time, and I was an MGO in engineering. Jean's still an AVP, and now we're colleagues and we're good friends. And at the time, somebody asked me, did I want to mentor and who would I want it to be? And Jean was the only woman I saw at that level at the time. And she was in the central organization, so that was different too. And I asked if she would mentor me, and she said yes. And so although it didn't directly affect my job, because Jean was never a fundraiser, and many steps after that here at Penn State, had nothing to do with whether or not Jean could make the decision about promoting me. That was never the case. But it was a great opportunity for me to learn from her experience and to understand this organization better. And it seemed like a kind of a non-traditional decision, but it was the right one. There was a formal mentorship, informal mentorships. Every supervisor I've had, a lot of my academic leaders, they're so smart. They lead giant teams, and I really enjoy talking to them about what they do and hearing their insights in managing and leading teams. So yeah, I think being open to mentorship is important and is important for your entire career.
Absolutely, and I hope that you take these pieces of advice seriously as you listen to this podcast, as you seek out other opportunities, both in the Honors College and at your home college or campus here at Penn State. Obviously, mentors are people. And Tina, I'd love to know if there's anybody from your scholar days or anybody that you work with now that you would like to give a quick shout out to here at the tail end of our conversation.
Wow. Okay. Who would I want to give a shout out to? Obviously, my team. I can't say enough about my team and how much they inspire me, and they're the reason I do what I do. I'm proud of the work we've done, especially during the pandemic, and proud of our success. I am moved all the time by the work we do to support students. So that's really important. There were lots of professors that I remember from my days. One who is retired now, he goes by R. Thomas Berner, Tom Berner, or as those of us who went through the journalism program called him just Berner. He's still in this region, and I think of him often as somebody who really had an impact on my career as a student. And I think people like you, Sean, people who are doing good work for our students, that's really important. It's what we need to be doing. So I give you a big shout out for doing this podcast and for giving me an opportunity to talk like this. It's been a lot of fun, and I enjoy enjoy anything I can do to support our students, and I appreciate that you've made space for that.
I'm glad that you were able to join me on it. So are there any last pieces of advice that you wanted to share with said students before we wrap up with the last kind of closeout questions?
I'd like to tell the students that, taking risks is good. There are challenges at every stage, but you assess those challenges and you take a calculated risk. Sometimes the really hard choice, the thing that's making you feel uncomfortable, is going to be the best choice. It's going to be the thing that you should say yes to. And I'd encourage them to be conscious of that when they're doing things that might push them beyond their comfort zone. Taking a job that maybe is outside their study area or outside the geographic area where they thought they were going to land. But maybe they need to really understand that feeling and decide if that's something that maybe they should be looking at. And when it comes to mentors, I think some students have a lot of natural mentors, and those individuals who tell them what it's like to be a professional, what does it look like to get dressed for a job interview and all of that. But many of our students don't have those natural mentors. Don't be ashamed of the fact that you don't have them and you don't know the answers to those questions, and find somebody to ask. That's what mentoring is all about. That's the type of thing that honestly I enjoy doing more than anything in a mentoring relationship, is helping people answer the questions that they might be afraid to ask. And so don't be afraid of that. Find somebody to help you with that. And you'll be surprised. Nobody is going to be unhappy that you've asked them that question. They're going to be excited to help you with that.
That is really, really good advice, especially if you identify as a first-generation student, or maybe you don't even know that you identify as a first-generation student. Tina, if they want to connect with you to have these conversations, what's the best way to reach out to you?
They can definitely reach me on LinkedIn. You can find me as Tina Hennesse, Tina Flint Hennesse. Flint is my maiden name, and it kind of has become my default middle name. And so I'm happy to connect there. I'd welcome an email if somebody wanted to send me one. My email is Tina, Tina, @psu.edu. So it's pretty simple. And I'm always open to allowing individuals to do that as well.
And as is tradition on the show, our last question is, if you were a flavor of Berkey Creamery ice cream, which would you be? And most importantly, as a scholar alumna, why that flavor?
All right. Well, so I would have to be WPSU Coffee Break. There is no better ice cream in the world. To bring together coffee, which is one of my favorite things, with little bits of chocolate in an ice cream that at the Berkey Creamery is, giant, too much, but so delicious. I can't think of it better. I know that's not scholarship, but it is my favorite, and I love it.
I have not been keeping track, but WPSU Coffee Break is a very popular response among our alumni. I think it might have something to do with those late nights writing the thesis and the coffee element, but always a great choice. Tina, thank you so much for joining me today and offering really, really great advice for our students, for our young alumni who are listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean. I really, really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, scholars, for listening and learning with us today. We hope you will take something with you that will contribute to how you shape the world. This show proudly supports the Schreyer Honors College Emergency Fund, benefiting scholars experiencing unexpected financial hardship. You can make a difference at raise.psu.edu/Schreyer. Please be sure to hit the relevant subscribe, like, or follow button on whichever platform you are engaging with us on today. You can follow the college on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on news, events, and deadlines. If you have questions about the show or are a scholar alum who'd like to join us as a guest here on Following the Gone, please connect with me at scholaralumni@psu.edu. Until next time, please stay well, and we are